Hello again. Hello, everyone. Anyone? Uh, Gordon Causey coming to you live, unscripted, freewheeling on a Sunday, as I like to do. This is the third time I've done it. And of course, Candy the Wonder Pup is here. Come here. Let people see you. Oh, she is a handful. 3.5 years old. I call her Candy the Wonder Pup. I'll probably still be calling that when she's creaking around at 12, 13 years of age or more. Anyway, let me give her a treat. Shake, lay down, speak, come up. Maybe one day I'll teach her to roll over, play dead, other things. Make her like a trained seal. Adjust. My miserable and pathetic YouTube channel with zero production values. So today is the 30th, Sunday the 30th of July, and it's now 11:19 p.m. So we're coming up on the 31st. Very soon, I'll keep this one. I'm not going past midnight. But I titled this something about the sword of Damacles, this feeling that there's a sword of Damacles hanging over our collective heads. And I think most will be familiar with the reference. I did a quick little search because I know the reference very well. I've heard the term used many times, but I don't know the exact background story. I was just assumed it went back to ancient Greece, and it does. Something about the goddess Dionysus or something, one of her courtiers, and this sword that was hanging over Damocles, hanging over this guy's head and held there by a thread with the potential for it to drop at any time. So anytime you feel like there's impending trouble on the horizon, hence the expression, the sword of Damocles. And I look at it and it's almost like there are multiple swords, or or one sword, and any number of things could send it crashing down. And it's an unsettling feeling, and I don't imagine that I'm the only person who feels this way. What could send it down? I mean, we've all been reading the news during the past week about climate change, global warming, stick whatever label you want on it. There are all kinds of stories that came out just recently in this past week about the Earth having experienced its hottest period or its hottest day in 120,000 or 200,000 years or something like that. Today, in my little corner of southeastern Ontario, Canada, it was cool. It was in the morning, probably 12, 13 degrees Celsius. We're talking about 55 to 65, hardly boiling, and it stayed cool, seasonally cool throughout the entire day. It's summer, we get hot days, we get days that aren't as hot. We can even get cool weather like we had today. But, we've heard the news, the reporting. John Kerry is now targeting, his rhetoric is targeting the agricultural industry, saying that agriculture is responsible for 33% or something, some high figure. I think it's 33 or 23%, a quarter or a third of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, carbon, and that, you can't have a carbon reduction plan without targeting the agricultural industry, the agricultural field. And yet we're a planet of 8 billion people, we're told, and people need to be fed. And so you have to wonder what's coming down. Is something going to come down on the climate front? People have speculated about the possibility of climate lockdowns, of restrictions being placed on people to reduce carbon footprints. There's been talk of banning gas stoves and things like this. And you just have to wonder, is it going to happen? And we're seeing this incremental, people have called it boiling the frog, that old analogy of you stick a frog in water and you just raise the temperature ever so slightly and incredibly slowly so that the frog never notices until before the frog knows it, it's being boiled alive. Uh, so is something going to happen on the climate front? Or is just, in Canada, gas in my area now is $1.62, somewhere around between $1.60 and $1.65 per liter. You get something like 5 liters or in a gallon. So do the math if you're American. Canadians pay insane prices for gas, especially considering we're one of the world's major producers, one of the nations in the world with the highest reserves of oil, and yet we're paying insane amounts for gasoline here. Then you have the whole COVID story that's never completely gone away. And there have been reports this past week, CNN talking about the fact that there's been a summer surge, and maybe it's abating somewhat right now, but you have to question whether or not we could return to that insane time again. When the fall rolls around, I've read articles that have said that basically when the fall and winter months around, when humidity drops, when the air gets incredibly dry, that is when viral pathogens spread much more widely. And when the cooler fall and cold winter air sets in, and when respiratory droplets are said to be able to hang in the air for hours and maybe even days if the conditions are right. I know that some people don't believe in viruses. They don't believe that they actually exist. I tend to take a middling approach, and I think there are two aspects to it. Yes, I do think viruses exist, but at the same time, I think most people fight them off because they're healthy and they're able to resist. Their immune systems are able to fight them off. Been doing a podcast with a buddy of mine down in North Carolina called Wisdom and Knowledge 5, and we interviewed a guy named Jason Christoff who calls himself a self-sabotage coach, someone who helps people. His name's Jason Christoff. He tells people how to avoid engaging in behaviors that lead to self-sabotage, torpedoing your own success, torpedoing your own happiness, as it were. And it was an eye-opening conversation that we had because I look at it personally. And I think I've engaged in those same behaviors. And according to Jason, that because of the media we consume, be it in movies, television, music, online, that the bombardment that we receive of images and such, that they have the potential to impact us on a subconscious level. And you're battling the enemy within. You're being attacked from the inside. And so there's a need to protect yourself and a need to insulate yourself somewhat from all this negative content being thrust at you. I brought up the fact that, as a 57-year-old guy, one of the TV shows that I grew up watching as a kid from an early age, and I think it started before I was even the Flintstones. And I think it started coming into the air sometime in the 60s. And that show had a common element. You had Fred Flintstone, who was a working class schmo, working in a gravel pit or a quarry pit. And he always had dreams of success, wealth, power, those kinds of things. And he would strive towards them. And usually encapsulated in one 30-minute episode, he would achieve, and quite often he achieved which he was aiming for. And then ultimately, he would go back into his cave dwelling, his house made out of. I mean, if you haven't seen the Flintstones, it was a well done show, kind of the Simpsons of its day in a fashion, not quite as irreverent, but similar social commentary going on. And he'd always end up back where he was, and he would be happy at the end. You know, don't aim too high was the message being programmed. Um, so going on with what's going on in the world, I mean, we have talk of CBDCs, which are central bank digital currencies. Uh, there's concern from many quarters that the uh, monetary policies being enacted, whether it's in Canada, the United States, Europe, wherever, pretty much the entire Western developed world, that we're printing money on biblical at unprecedented scales. Interest rates are on the rise. Inflation has gone insane. Canada keeps changing what they call their basket of goods that they use to determine what the annual inflation rate. And we were recently told that it's only 2.8%. But at the same time, you have other reports saying that food inflation has gone up over 10%, double digit food inflation. Gases or energy costs are certainly up over 10% year over year. And then you have mortgage payments. You know, anyone having to renew a mortgage now is looking at about a 30% increase in the cost of servicing their mortgages. And so I think it's almost cruel for the government to pat itself on the back and say we've managed to maintain inflation at 2.8%. There's no line. There are three types of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics, or lies, damn lies, and accounting. And it strikes me that this is just an accounting trick. Someone has just renewed their mortgage and is facing 30% higher carrying costs on their mortgage payments, and then going to the grocery store and paying more than 10% higher prices for the same grocery cart than they were paying a year ago, who's having to fill up their car because they have to get to work. And those costs have gone up double digits. And then where in the heck do you get this 2.8% figure from? I think it's just smoke and mirrors. And then, of course, we have the whole trans business being foisted on the population, trading truth for a lie. You're born male, you're born female. You can be an effeminate guy. Doesn't change that you're a guy, and a girl can be a tomboy, but it doesn't change the fact that she's a girl, that she's female. But in today's world, and then even just in the last week again, there was some form of a press conference about UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, which used to be UFOs, and talking about having congressional hearings and trying to pull back the veil of secrecy that exists within NASA and other US government agencies. And they say that the information is being held. There's one individual even claiming that the United States has recovered life forms from crashed UFOs, UAPs. And is the sword going to drop? Are we going to have climate lockdowns? Are we going to have more COVID mandated nonsense? Are we going to see a transfer from our current currencies to this CBDC, central bank digital currency? Are we going to suddenly hear an announcement that we've made contact with previously unknown beings, and maybe suggesting that it's from another planet? Personally, my own personal view, I don't believe in extraterrestrial life, but I do think it's possible that there are life forms, perhaps even advanced life forms, that we're not aware of, that are terrestrial in nature. And I mean, that's a whole can of worms right there. I do know that many will look at the vastness of the universe and say that they find it inconceivable to think that we're the only ones. And then you look at the pyramids, and whether they be the ones in Egypt or Mexico or in other places around the world, or the Nazca lines down in Peru that can only be seen from miles up, um, and countless other examples of ancient knowledge, ancient wisdom, ancient structures that archaeologists can't tell. Like, take the pyramids in Egypt. Archaeologists to this day can't determine how they were built. If you go into what they call, and I've never been, haven't physically seen it myself, but I've seen obviously pictures of what they call the King's Chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. I think it's called Khufu, the biggest of the three. And the granite is perfectly smooth, and the pieces have been cut so perfectly that you can't even slide a piece of paper between them. And this idea that they were created using just stone chisels, or copper chisels or something, just strains credulity. It just seems impossible. If I was to go down my own personal view, being a Christian and believing in the Bible, and reading about what Genesis depicts as what the world was like pre-flood, pre-Noah's flood. And I think it's that's what I believe. I believe that there was advanced technological civilizations that got wiped out by the flood. And one area where I I don't like, I'm not going to say I think the Bible is wrong on it, but at the same time, if you read Genesis, and those who hold to a strictly literal and this idea that the Bible is completely inerrant, that there are no mistakes in it whatsoever, that there's no omissions, no errors, zero, that there were only 8 people: Noah, his 3 sons, and the 4 women to whom they were married. Those 8 individuals were the only ones who survived the flood on the entire planet Earth. And I consider that a possibility, but I also consider it equally possible, and perhaps more possible, more likely, that other pockets of individuals survived. And there was a general wipeout of the human population, with Noah and his family surviving, but then pockets of other little pockets of humanity surviving in other locations. That's going way off track. And then there's a new movie out. It opened July 28th, so 2 days ago. And it's called The Essential Church. And it's not getting nearly the buzz that the movie Sound of Freedom got. Not nearly the same buzz. And it's put out by Grace Life Church, which I believe is in Los Angeles. It's John MacArthur's church. And I already did a video expressing my misgivings about both Sound of Freedom and The Chosen, which are both properties of a company called Angel Studios. And I gave my reasons for my misgivings about those productions. I don't have the same misgivings about The Essential Church, but I haven't seen it yet. It has not been released in Canada. I've gotten in touch with whoever manages their Facebook page, and even offered to do a podcast with them, with my buddy Mark, for Wisdom and Knowledge. And they were very receptive. They said the director of the film would be thrilled to come on, would be happy to do a podcast. Unfortunately, the timing didn't work out. They're in California, and they wanted to do it no later than 4 or 5 their time. And just trying to work out schedules has so far proven to be too problematic. We're still working on it, though. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to get them on, or get this individual on. His name is Shannon, and do a podcast with him about that movie, because the insanity of what happened when large numbers of people could go to Walmart, Costco, where armies of workers could go in and out of Amazon warehouses, but you couldn't go to church, was absolute insanity. And I think the biggest part of the reason why they had to clamp down on churches, and there were a number of churches defying the orders. There was John MacArthur's. There was one called Calvary God Speak in Thousand Oaks, California, pastored by a gentleman by the name of Rob McCoy. His church stayed open. There's this Greg Locke, I think he's in Tennessee. So in the United States, there were a large number of churches, large churches that were defying the orders. Canada as well. We had Grace Life. I think it's called Grace Life as well. And Pastor Coates was his name. Can't remember his first name. Tim Coates, Jim Coates. Forget his first name, but regardless, Pastor Coates was thrown in jail. His church, they had hundreds of people were meeting week after week, month after month, when churches were either A, supposed to be completely closed, or B, they were supposed to be restricted, something like 30 odd people, no more than 30 odd people in the building. Like there was supposed to be someone standing outside of the church and saying, well, we have a pew for 2 people. And a family of 5 would be told, okay, well, 1 parent and 1 child can go in, and the rest of you have to go and sit in the car. And why did they do this? I would submit that that church in Edmonton, Grace Life, it was something like 300-400 people gathering week after week, month after month. They were demonstrating, putting it on open display for the world to see. No one was getting sick. No one was dying. And then others may have started to question and gone, well, why can't I open my business? If that church can gather and no one's getting sick and no one's dying. And then there was another guy, and his name was Tim Stevens. He was in Calgary as well. His was a Baptist church. And his congregation went and met in a park, and the police service sent out drones to spy them out, and he was thrown in jail. And this kind of activity is what went on is chronicled in the movie. I've watched the trailer. You can watch the trailer here on YouTube. I would invite anyone to give it a look. And if that movie does become available at some point in my area, Sound of Freedom made its way here. There's the closest theater to me is about a 15-20 minute drive away in the neighboring town. It has a little 2 or 3 screen private, not Cineplex, not AMC, not one of the big companies, just a little private theater. And they have been showing it. I haven't checked recently. I'm not going to go see it. As I say, I put out the reasons why a while ago. I do imagine at some point in the future, I'll probably take it in once everything dies away. And those are just my views. I'm not saying to anyone else, don't go see it. If you want to go see it, go see it. I'm not into censorship at all. But that's the end of my video. It was a Sunday today. I did not make it to church. I'm finding it difficult. There are seasons that we go through, and every now and again, there are Sundays where I just can't wait to go. Sundays where I kind of push myself to go, even though I don't necessarily feel motivated. And those Sundays in particular always end up being very good when I push myself. But then there are other Sundays like this one where I don't push myself, where I don't feel like going and I don't push myself to go. And I should. But anyway, that's where we are. And we'll see what happens in the world. I'll probably do another video in the coming days. And if I don't, I'll trying to make a point of doing these once a week on Sundays, freewheeling, unscripted, just what's on my mind. Anyone who watches and likes my channel, I do genuinely appreciate the likes, the shares. It gives me my little endorphin drugs to the brain, those little chemical reactions you get in your brain when you get a like or a share or a subscription. And anyway, we'll talk to you later. I kept it under 30 minutes. It's now 11:44. Have a good night, everyone, and God bless.